So here's something interesting. The South African retail cannabis industry in 2021 was tentatively valued at nearly 36 billion rand, about $2 billion. That same year, government unveiled an updated version of the master plan for the industrialisation and commercialisation of cannabis in South Africa. Also in 2021, the master plan outlined how the formal cannabis industry in our country would be a game changer for the economy, as also the industry has been predominantly operating on an underground basis and was mainly being traded on a black market. The black market value, you ask how much it was? 28 billion rand. Remember how much the other one was? Rastafarai are balling, guys. Just so that we can get everybody up to speed. What is cannabis? Cannabis is a plant of the Cannabisaceae family, and it's been used for millennia for medical as well as recreational purposes, but also as a hemp fiber to create paper, clothing, fuel, food. It's not just for smoking, guys. So being able to grow more and more of this, more freely, more openly, opens up commercial opportunities for a lot of commercial as well as small-scale South African cannabis growers. The opportunity to commercialize the hemp and cannabis sector in South Africa will mean that we will be jumping into a fast-growing, multi-billion-dollar global sector which has local and international markets. Take for instance this, the potential legal pharmaceutical market for hemp and cannabis in South Africa alone has been estimated to be around $100 billion a year. That's when we get things right. That's how big it will be. The legal hemp and cannabis sector has the potential to create more than 130,000 new jobs in South Africa. But just like many things, there are structural hurdles that we have to get over. For instance, growing insango for export, for medicine, is currently not feasible for small-scale farmers because of the startup costs. Costs recorded in 2021 were very restrictive to anybody who is a small-scale farmer and doesn't have a lot of money. A medical cannabis license from SAPA costs about 26,628 rand, or around $1,400. Besides the license fees, to set up a medicinal cannabis facility, you need roughly around 3.3 million rand, around $182,000 to 5 million rand, or $300,000, which is beyond the reach of many traditional and small-scale farmers in South Africa. But there are even more challenges when we go further. First, the government fails to implement changes needed to ensure that the entire sector is able to grow in a way that's going to benefit township and rural entrepreneurs who are in the cannabis industry. The second is that from mid-2022, small-scale farmers who were promised by government that they would have their licenses have still not received those. They can't trade legally. However, some of these farmers, even in areas like the Eastern Cape, are still waiting and they can't take advantage of this opportunity. A new law has been signed and the ZOL is rolling. The ball is rolling. The new Cannabis Law is now in place. On Tuesday, the 28th of May, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, with his pen that was doing a lot of work just before elections, signed into law the Cannabis Private Purpose Act, which regulates the cultivation, possession, and consumption of marijuana by adults in their private settings in South Africa. Under this new act, cannabis is completely removed from the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act, further allowing amendment of the schedules to the Medicine and Related Substances Act, as well as amendments to other measures that would enable the industrialization of the cannabis sector in South Africa. The news comes some 6 months after South Africa's National Assembly approved the bill, paving the way for a lot of this legalization of personal use of cannabis. The loosening of the cannabis laws in South Africa started around 2018 with the Constitutional Court judgment that decriminalized private cannabis use, signaling a possible turning point for South Africa's up-in-smoke landscape. Anyone 18 years or older can use cannabis at any place where the public doesn't have access to. Adults may possess unlimited seeds of a cannabis plant and seedlings, up to 4 flowering cannabis plants per person or 8 per household if 2 or more adults live there. In a private place, up to 100 grams of dried cannabis and up to 600 grams of dried cannabis per person or 1,200 grams per household in a private place. Adults may smoke and consume cannabis in private places and even give to their friends without any compensation up to 30 seeds or seedlings, 1 flowering plant, and 100 grams of dried cannabis. However, the law establishes various offenses for exceeding cultivation and possession limits. For instance, failing to ensure cannabis plants are inaccessible to children or not complying with cultivation standards means that you're breaking the law. Smoking or consuming cannabis in public places is prohibited but allowed in private spaces as long as it doesn't endanger others, particularly minors. Penalties range from fines to imprisonment depending on the offense and how it's classified. Also, the quantity of cannabis that's involved in each case. Opposition to earlier versions of the bill were saying that it makes no provision for the way in which some traditional healers and members of the Rastafari community currently use cannabis. Critics explain that some traditional healers give people cannabis as a form of treatment, and that must be preserved in the law and not criminalized. Since 2018, cannabis companies have been growing in South Africa. Approximately plus minus 100 cannabis-related companies are now investment ready, and these guys are mostly in the cultivation side of the business, not really the reselling. About 5 billion rand or $333 million has already been pumped into the South African cannabis industry. However, some critics fear that only the cash-rich foreign firms or foreign-funded firms will be able to take advantage of Africa's potential cannabis market. They feel that these foreign companies might likely lock out the domestic producers and erect a familiar model based on just raw material extraction with limited in-country value addition. The banking sector has been quite hesitant to invest in the cannabis industry because the old and current legislation, which in some shape or form still inhibits the financial institutions from even putting money into the industry. But with these new updates to the regulations, this might change, at least for the medicinal use industry within the greater cannabis industry, which is way more structured. And on the other hand, the retail and SMME space will likely still struggle to get access to the same funding, at least for the foreseeable future, due to the sector being very new and also banks not knowing how to work with them. Look, the banks want to get in. Banks like Nedbank, First Rand, and Absa have said that they are looking into the sector and they see a lot of potential in it. But they haven't been proactive in financing because of the restrictive legislative framework that's existed in the past. I'm sure it's going to change now. The fact remains that banks are generally risk averse, and while the cannabis sector has potential, it requires proper planning, adequate funding, and access to relevant expertise. And growers need off-take agreements. You can't just grow the stuff and no one's going to buy it. These need to be in place, and the people standing in line have to be willing to buy. We're all hoping that with the new government coming into play, cannabis can be prioritized and small-scale growers and rural communities can be given a space to get a piece of the action. Maybe I'm too hopeful, but I feel like South African regulators need to do their job to weed out bureaucracy, protect businesses, light up the industry, to crush all of the challenges in order for growers to smoke the competition. I mean, it is high time, right? Anyways, thanks for watching up until the end of this video. Please check out one of these videos, and I'm hoping that they'll be just as interesting as this one, and I promise we'll make it worth your while. Cheers.